Definitely suggest the LG Ultra Wide or the LG Ultra Wide, which is what I use. I love it. I'm giving one away this upcoming week for December 1st in the Discord for Christmas. And then we're going to be doing like a giveaway every week as well. But I highly recommend the LG Ultra Wide 37-inch monitor. Definitely one of my favorites. So, all right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Technical Tuesday. The big thing I want to focus on today is I want to go over the mRNA trade from yesterday. This was a really, really nice trade. And I went over it on the pre-market stream, and I kind of want to go over it now because a lot of people were asking, like, what did you see? All that kind of stuff. So here's what I want to go over, guys. So on mRNA, what I was looking at, right, is I came out to the daily chart, and when I saw that the European news was coming out about COVID kind of getting worse, and then redoing the lockdowns, and then the news came out about the fourth booster shot, I came out to the daily chart, and I started looking much like I did in the video that I made on YouTube about Affirm, and you can see, guys, that on the daily chart, we had a key level at the 277 level on the daily, because it's the bottom of the body of this candle right here on the daily, guys, from back in July, right? You see the bottom of the body of this candle is at the 277 level. And then we happen to also look at what we have here. We had the wick down from our hanging candle on the 4th of November, right? Also at the 277 level. So from that, what you can gain is that 277 level is going to be a key level in both directions. And to the upside, I knew that if we broke 277, we had a pretty solid chance to at least get into the gap here towards the 297 level on mRNA. And so my thesis on this trade was to take a starter before we hit that gap and then really size in on the break above, which I did. So that's what I was looking for on the mRNA trade. Again, I took a lotto size starter before we broke out because I knew I wanted to be sized for that move, and that's where that paid 300% gains. And then really, guys, once we broke over this 277 level is where I took my full position, and we ended up seeing the 289 level. We couldn't get to 290. The 300 level resistance is going to be huge on this. I don't know if we'll end up breaking over that resistance, but again, this was a very nice trade. It ended up being about a 27-point move in total, I believe. So really fantastic trade, guys. This is a fantastic example of using key levels from not only this most recent candle on the daily, but the candle that we saw, back in July, right? And that level wasn't just key then, it was key now as well, right? And so we saw that work in both ways. And that's really important to remember, guys, that you need to realize that these levels come from somewhere, and it's not random. It's from these key points on the daily chart that everyone can see, right? And so it's really, really important, like I mentioned, to understand where your levels are coming from and why you're getting them at certain points, right? So that's all that was. Like I mentioned on this trade, guys, I didn't use a single indicator, quote unquote, for this trade. I just used key levels. And, it's a perfect example of you don't need, VWAP and EMA clouds and all this random stuff to have a successful trade, right? So that is my, kind of thesis on the mRNA trade. Not complicated, guys. Gained this level from the daily. It was the 277.58 level. It was also a key support, like I mentioned. So if you go back and review, you'll see that, the body of this candle and the wick down here, you can obtain that's going to be a key level on the upside. So to go further into this, we are going to talk about shorting, right? And I think that this is good for a lot of the beginners that are in the group that aren't super familiar with shorting large caps, and knowing when is the good time and why and the thesis behind it. So I want to review the NVIDIA trade from today, which was my best trade of the day. I think it printed over 100%. I think it was 130%. And I kind of want to go over what I saw in the trade and why I took it, right? So on NVIDIA this morning, we are going to start on the 5-minute chart. If you are following along on Webull, right? 5-minute interval we're looking at this morning, right? So what I said this morning is that if we could hold NVIDIA under the 324 level, then we had a very good chance to see the 309 level, right? Which we ended up seeing. And okay, so how did I gain that level, right? So a really good place to look at what happened to NVIDIA once it broke 324, right? A lot of people were saying 323 was the level. I tended to disagree because when you saw us break down yesterday, look at where we saw the big price action move to the downside, right? We saw that when NVIDIA broke 324 down, right? You can see here, it's very, very evident that when we broke 324 down, we saw a big move to the downside. And what does that tell us? Okay, well, that's going to be a key level. So we know in the future, right, if we break 324, we're going to see a big move to the upside, or break 321, we're going to see a big move to the upside to 324, right? It's going to be a key level in both directions. So knowing that that 324 level is key was imperative to this trade, right? So the really key levels to mention are the wick down, which we saw yesterday, right? We briefly touched 321, and then the 324 level. And I think what happened this morning is we saw a really big bull trap happen, right? So we broke over 321 off open, and then look what happened, right? Everybody's buying. We see 321 break, and we see a lot of buying pressure come in, only to firmly reject the 324 level. Once we topped out at the 323.67 level, we couldn't even get to 324. We ended up hitting before that level that I mentioned, right? So we stayed under 324, and I saw this big wick start to form on this 5-minute candle on NVIDIA. So what did I do? I took my put position, right? And my stop loss would have been clearly defined, right? I took this position at 323. If we had broken over 323.60, I would have exited the trade. And sold for, whatever the loss had been at that point. But what we ended up seeing is once we failed the 323 level, I scaled in a little bit more. And then we saw this big move to the downside on NVIDIA, went all the way to 316. I exited the trade at this point because I didn't want to deal with a lot of the chop that we saw today. But then I, again, re-entered some puts here. They ended up paying again. Once we broke under 316, we saw them move down to actually 309.43. I personally think that we've kind of found a temporary bottom on NVIDIA for the time being, right, in this 308, 309 range. If we break below this level, we can tell that on the daily, right, that we're going to see the 300 level, right? Because, guys, this thing is so overextended, it's really not even funny. This thing needs to pull back, right? We need to pull back probably to the 260 level at some point, and I think that is coming shortly. However, for the time being, 300 is our next big support level, and if we break below 309, I really think we have a good chance to see 287, right? This isn't because NVIDIA is a bad company. This is because it just needed to pull back, right? It was due, and that's what we saw today and yesterday. And personally, I couldn't be happier with how the trade went. Would there have been more upside? Maybe. These were weekly contracts again, and these expire on Friday actually. So, was there? Excuse me, these expire tomorrow. Was there, more downside? Maybe. But, in all honesty, guys, I think that this was a fantastic move. This is, you caught the top, right? And that is one of the best positions to be in because, it was a, 20-minute trade and printed, 125% or something crazy like that, right? So it was a fantastic trade, and the way that I knew to go short was when I saw that selling pressure come in at the key level from yesterday, right? And that's why it's so important, guys, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing that I do is I check the hourly chart. And you guys know this, but when the market is a little bit slower or choppier like it's been this week, I tend to latch on to one stock that is traded really smoothly, and I'll just trade it over and over. Long, short, doesn't really matter. But that is why it's so important to, in the mornings, come and look at the 30-minute chart, right? Understand where we saw a key breakdown on the chart yesterday. And where was that? That was when we broke under 324. That's how I'm gaining these levels, guys. When you really start to understand this stuff and grasp the concept, you'll be gaining those levels without me, right? Like that, and that is what I'm for right now, right? That's what the Patreon is for, is to help me guide you to understanding where these levels are coming from and how they are so impactful to our trades. But guys, it's really important to understand why we're seeing the moves that we're seeing, right? The best trade that you can take isn't the one that is going to grow your account the most. It's going to be the one that teaches you the most while profiting, right? And this trade should have taught you a lot. You know, when you see NVIDIA break over 324, right, we'll probably see a really nice move to the upside, probably to 327, 335, right? So it's really important, guys, to understand why we are seeing these moves, not just that we are seeing them, right? So that's what I really wanted to reinforce today. As far as the future goes for NVIDIA, guys, this isn't looking like the best setup to me. If we continue to see weakness tomorrow, I would not be surprised to fill this gap down to the 300 area, right? I think psych level, that is where we are headed. Could we bounce? Definitely. And this is, you know, I'm not going to say that 309 was the bottom, but, you know, I think that's a decent pullback. It's about 10% from all-time highs. I personally think there is a much larger pullback in the near future on the horizon, but for the time being on NVIDIA, this really gives us a nice base to work with. And, you know, we know the key levels now, right? Key support on the hourly, right, is 309 now. We have really big resistance, you know, on the 30-minute hourly chart, whatever you want to, you know, use at the 324 level, right? So we know those levels. And like I said, guys, it again is really, really imperative to understand, you know, why we are seeing these moves that are happening. I've said this a million times and I will say it again. You'll know this is paying off when you start to understand and obtain those levels, you know, in the mornings, maybe you're making your own personal watch list and then mine comes out and it's like, oh, Manz's levels are the same as mine. Like you know, that's probably a good indicator. You know, it doesn't have to be me. Maybe it's another trader you really like on Twitter, but, you know, I try to really give you guys the best levels possible. So what made me look at NVIDIA the day before? I knew that NVIDIA was extremely overextended, guys. When you see, you know, this is what we call kind of like the gravestone doji, right? It's where you see this massive selling wick, right? Like we saw on NVIDIA. And look at the following candle, right? And that's a great question that somebody just asked in the live chat. What made you look at NVIDIA the day before? Well, I saw that NVIDIA was gapping up like crazy. I was not in the trade to the long side, really. But I knew that there was going to be an opportunity on the short side because we saw a $35 move, right, to the upside after earnings. And, you know, we saw a really big psychological resistance, in my opinion, at the 350, you know, all-time high level. We didn't even get there. We got to 346, which is kind of a natural selling point right before a big psych level resistance. And then look what happens. When you see a gravestone doji like this, that's, you know, a name for a candle that is, you know, kind of been formed, you know, over the existence of trading. I don't, you know, I'm not huge on using, you know, those particular names for candles, but this is a fantastic example. What this is a massive selling wick, right? So on this 30-minute candle at 346, we can see a massive selling pressure at that 346 level on NVIDIA. And when you see that, right, and because I obtain my levels and setups from the 30-minute or hourly chart in the mornings, I saw that on NVIDIA yesterday, and I knew that I wanted to play it to the short side. Banked yesterday on NVIDIA. And, you know, today, even better, right? So I'm really, really happy with the way the NVIDIA trades have went. Levels don't lie. Absolutely. My thoughts on Apple. That's a good question. A lot of people are asking. I don't know. You know, today, guys, Apple showed a lot of extreme relative strength, right? And, you know, why do we see that relative strength? I'm not too positive. Whenever Apple breaks out to an all-time high, it does tend to see some relative strength. I think this is desperately in need of a pullback after making new all-time highs, right? We saw this move to 165. Everything was pretty oversold, guys. This is, you know, kind of the theme we saw. We saw these massive green candles, right? Like on the 22nd, we saw a massive move on Apple, and we've pulled back a little bit since, right? But now Apple's trying to form a base in the 158.77 level. And you know what? It held that level like a champ today. Every single time we tried to break that level, you know, it was so resistant, right? And that 159, they were protecting it like nobody's business because they knew that under 159, we were going to have a pretty serious pullback. But guys, Apple held 159 like an absolute champ today. This is not what you want to see if you like trading options, right? Is this chop, right? We saw this very, very tight range of less than $1, right? This looks like it's a lot of price action, but in reality, we were consolidating with $1 range, right? It's, you know, pretty difficult to, you know, have anything more than a 10 to 15% trade on options when you're dealing with $1 of range, right? Even on weeklies, it's pretty tight. So That is my current thought on Apples. You know what? We traded in a range today. For me, right, it's pretty clear. Over 161.80 calls, under 159 definitely puts, right? Because, guys, the harder it is to break a resistance or break a support, the bigger the move we get, right? So that goes for the long side. If we're trying to break a resistance over and over and over again, and then we finally break it, it's going to be a big move because we've been trying to break it so hard. Whereas the same thing is true for the downside. If we keep trying to break down, right, on a stock, and then we finally break that level, right? So in this case, 159 on Apple, whenever Apple does break that level, we're going to see a big move to the downside. And that is really a crucial thing that I talk about whenever I do one-on-ones. I'm like, memorize these levels, right? Like, you may not trade Apple tomorrow, but then on Friday morning, maybe we have a rough day on Friday and we pull down below 159. You'll already have the trigger memorized. You'll be like, oh, I see Apple on my watch list to my right. It looks like it's testing 159. Let me bring that up on my main chart and look for a put trade to the downside, right? And I think that's a really major thing, guys, is understanding that you can make money both ways, right? Like, you could not be a one-sided trader in this market if you do not know how to short and understand that it's just the inverse of going long. We make money both ways, right? That's what the market is for. We are not perma bulls, or I am not, at least, right? I can't speak for every one of you, but I am not a perma bull. Levels don't lie, and they work in both directions. So it's extremely, extremely important to remember the harder the resistance break or the harder the support break, the bigger move we're going to see, right? So, my thoughts on Apple going forward, under 159, I would look at the 155 puts again. Over 161.80, look at the 165 calls, right? So pretty simple, definitely, pretty clear. Yeah, can I go over my APVO trade from today? Absolutely. So, guys, I almost got shook out. I actually was about to shake out of a decent bit of my trade, but we held the level that we had kind of started at. Honestly, we flushed down all the way to 850, and I took my position at 960, which was the support level, kind of teetering right here, right? And we kind of flushed down momentarily, and then we see this big move up. And really, guys, you know what is really clear about this one? You know why I took the trade? LGV or whatever, right? LNGV or whatever the ticker was that ran the other day that we traded right from Friday. It went crazy, right? And why did it go crazy? Nobody really knows, because people needed something to trade. That's what that is. There's tons of liquidity. It rotated the float. It's not because the news was amazing, right? On APVO, I looked at the daily chart. Whenever you see a chart like this and something is getting insane volume, like this had 164 million in volume today, guys, right? Like rotated the float nonstop. These low floats are getting hot, right? This is going to be a great trade. Like, this is the most volume we've seen on something like this, right? Like, even if you look back at the daily volume from back in November of last year, right? Look at it. This ran, right, from 6 or whatever. Yeah, from 6 to 60 last year, right? So keep that in mind. This thing has a history of running. That is a humongous thing. When something has a history of gapping up, it automatically, people like it psychologically because they know that they've made money on it before. So traders are going to be more inclined to trade it, right? Because of the fact that they've made money on it before and they know that it's a former runner. So something being a former runner is a huge part when I'm trading commons on small caps or mid caps, whatever you want to call it, right? It's a huge thing. When something is a former runner, it is a massive deal for me. And I knew that APVO pulled a move from 6 to 60 last year, almost at this time last year. When that's like, guys, stocks repeat themselves, right? Stocks repeat themselves 1,000%. And so when you see a trade like this, right, and something that went 6 to 60, and then you're like, oh, this is getting really good volume, and they have decent news, and things are running hard on news right now, especially low floats, it all comes together. It ended up being a fantastic trade. So really, really big. That's a great question. Why did I take the trade? Former runner, great theme, good news, and an even better daily chart. This thing has room, right? Like maybe I think APVO could pull pull like some crazy type of move and go to 30, honestly. Like we saw LGVN was running again after hours. You know what? If we look at this chart, I'm not in it right now, but if it holds 1330, guys, that was a huge breakout level. So if it holds 1330, don't be surprised if it makes another move. And that is the reason that I'm in the Neuro trade. Closing in on my stop slightly, but guys, look at the daily. Former runner. Same chart as APVO, like same exact chart. If we see APVO go nuts, remember this thing went to 38, 40, right? Like this thing went crazy. It was $13 last month. I can't think of better risk reward, honestly. Like I love this trade. And I like trading Neuro. I've made money on it before. I've lost money on it before too, but it tends to be a really nice trade, especially at these levels, guys. This is very, 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 very advantageous when it comes to a risk reward play, right? And it tends to have a pop every 3 months, right? August, late September pop, right? So every 2 months, right? It gets a pretty solid pop, and we've been without a pop now for 2.5 months, so it's kind of due. How do you find out how many times the float got rotated? So you just take the float and then you divide it by how much volume there was in the day, right? So if APVO is a 10 million float and APVO traded 164 million shares today, that means the float rotated 16 times, right? Because 16 times 10 million, which is the float of APVO, equals 160 million. That would be your volume for the day. So that's how you find out how many times the float got rotated. Good question. So that's why I took the Neuro trade. I want to close out the video by saying thank you guys so much for all the support on the new YouTube video. It means literally a ton to me. If you haven't yet, please go check it out. Throw it a like if you like it. Drop a comment if you want me to keep making more of those. I'm trying to put out some really basic information for my public following, just to kind of share some knowledge back onto it. And I think that YouTube is an awesome platform. I've been wanting to make videos for a long time, and I have this awesome studio to make lives for you guys. So I'm trying to put it to good use and kind of expand my content on various platforms. So I really appreciate all the support. It means a ton to me, guys. And I really can't thank you enough. If you haven't checked it out, please go do so. It means the world to me. Again, small account challenge starts next week on Wednesday. We are, probably going to have a slower day tomorrow. I'm going to trade in the morning and then get ready to spend some time with family on Thursday. Enjoy some time off, guys. It's been a busy couple weeks, and it's going to be even busier next month because we have the small account challenge, and then the entire beginner video series is going to be dropping. So I could not be more excited for that. So I will see you guys on the pre-market live first thing tomorrow morning. Going to be a shorter day. Volume should be a little bit lower, and then we go enjoy our Thanksgiving. So love you guys. Thank you for tuning into Technical Tuesday. Hopefully this taught you about shorting some large cap, trading some low floats, and what I saw in the mRNA trade. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you in the morning. Peace.